I'm James Sexton. Welcome back to Better Call Sexton. This is the Taylor and Travis Prenup special. Let's get after it.
So, of course, we're talking about the big news. Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift.
I can't believe you said Travis first.
I was going to say, I guess it should be Taylor Swift.
Let's go in order of net worth, and let's go Taylor first, then far behind Travis.
Well, I'm glad you said
Taylor's like 10 Travises financially.
Well, I'm glad you said net worth, because that's the big question on the table. People want to know from you, viral clip you had recently talking about a potential prenup. What are we looking at here?
What are we looking at here? Look, all right, so let's break it down a little bit. Okay, so first of all, we got to quote two rappers, both of whom have been disgraced, sorry, but it's all about the Benjamins, baby. And if you ain't no chump, holla, we want prenup, yeah, okay? So again, don't say who said those things. They were still good sentiment, okay? So look, high net worth prenups, low net worth prenups, something I've been doing for 25 years. The last 10 years or so, it's been a lot more high net worth prenups, done a lot of celebrities, athletes, people of this level of net worth. I think I've only done maybe 2 billionaire prenups. So Taylor would be a billionaire one. And yes, in a now viral clip, I offered to Taylor that I would be happy as a courtesy to her to do her prenup. I'm sure she's got an excellent legal team. I think she's in Tennessee. I actually know who she would probably be using for it because there's a firm there that's phenomenal and does high net worth prenups. I've done consulting work with them before, but I think she's in very good hands. But Taylor, if you are watching, if you happen to be a fan of Better Call Sexton, love that, by the way. I've said before, I'm a closet fan of yours. I listen to it in the car. I sing to myself. It's okay. I don't have to. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm comfortable. Okay. I love it. But at the end of the day, you know, this is a prenup that makes sense for both parties, but especially, of course, for the higher net worth of the two, and that would be Taylor Swift. So a prenuptial agreement, just to break it down in the simplest terms for those of you playing at home, prenuptial agreement is just a contract. It's a contract between two people, and it is prenup. Pre meaning before, nup meaning nuptials, meaning marriage. So it's executed prior to the nuptials. It's a prenuptial agreement. It's a contract between two people. And in that contract, what you're essentially saying is what your respective rights and obligations would be in the event your marriage ends in something other than death. Why do I say it that way? Because all marriages end. They end in either death or divorce. And over 50% of them end in divorce. Now, again, I hope that Taylor and Travis's marriage ends in death. I know that sounds like a weird ass thing to say. I don't mean ill will to either of them. I hope they live happily ever after, the two of them happily married. I hope they execute their prenuptial agreement, put it in a safe somewhere, and then 30 years from now, they turn around and go, oh, look at this piece of paper that we never needed because we lived happily ever after and there was never a need for it. And our marriage ends in death, preferably simultaneously at the age of 105 years old in their sleep peacefully. That's what I wish for both of them. Consider that my wedding gift to them. But a prenuptial agreement is an incredibly important piece of paper for any couple. It doesn't have to be billionaires like Taylor Swift or 100 millionaires like Travis. It can be for anybody, even people who are on the come up. And what I tell people always is that every single marriage has a prenup. It's either a prenup that was drafted by the state legislature of the state in which you reside, or the two people who love each other more than the other 8 billion other options in the world. Now, listen, I can't make decisions for all of you out there, but have you ever been to the DMV? If you've been to the DMV, have you ever looked around the DMV and thought, oh yeah, these people should be in charge of everything. They should be in charge of making the rules for my relationship in the event that anything breaks up between me and my spouse. I guarantee you didn't feel that way. And ultimately, if you let the prenup that's drafted by the government, the default, okay, govern your respective rights and obligations in the event of divorce, you are putting a colossal amount of faith in the state legislature. Now look, whether you're on the left, on the right, or somewhere in the middle, you probably would agree that politicians are not the people that should be making rules that govern your most intimate relationship. So in that case, that's why a prenuptial agreement makes sense for pretty much everybody. So is it different when you have a low net worth or high net worth individual? Not really. The nuts and bolts of a prenuptial agreement are essentially the same because what you're doing is creating categories of assets. The simplest kind of prenup is what I talk about in my book in a chapter called Yours, Mine, and Ours, a Financial System That Works. That basically says, hey, if it's in my name, whether it's an asset or a liability, I keep it. If it's in your name, whether an asset or a liability, you keep it. And if it's in our joint names, we split it 50-50. Simple, clean, and it opens up the possibility that either person's net worth could go up or down during the marriage, and it forces a couple to have discussions throughout the marriage about what their respective rights and obligations are in the event of a divorce. What do we owe each other? That's really the conversation that people are having when they're talking about a prenup. What value do we bring to the table? What value do we owe each other by virtue of our marriage? And there's all kinds of clauses, and I've drafted every possible conceivable version of clauses you could possibly imagine in your wildest imagination in prenuptial agreements. But in a case like this, where you have two people that are coming into a marriage with a substantial net worth and a diverse number of holdings, like Taylor doesn't just have bank and investment accounts and retirement accounts, real estate that she owns. She has intellectual property that she owns. You know, there's been a lot of discussion in the press about her catalog of music and the rights that she owns to various things.
That's a great question. People want to know. It came out from Forbes and Newsweek. The approximate value of Taylor Swift's entire music catalog to date is around $600 million.
Boom goes the dynamite. Yes. Again, she's a high net worth individual. And again, I've represented my highest net worth client was worth about $8 billion. And when people have that level of assets, the diversity of their holdings are amazing. And they don't just hold assets in their name. They hold assets that are held in trust, and the trusts own LLCs, and the LLCs own real estate, and the LLCs pay the expenses of the trust in what's called an intentionally defective grant or trust. And they bequest things to their great-grandchildren that haven't been born yet, all to avoid paying taxes and to preserve generational wealth. So when that happens, it makes lots of sense for the purposes of trust and estates law, tax avoidance, and wealth preservation, but it makes divorce messy, like crazy messy, like the reason I can afford a Rolex kind of messy. So trust me when I say, anybody with a brain in their head and over $1,000 in the bank, it makes a whole lot of sense for you to take the couple of minutes to call a lawyer and to schedule a consultation and have a prenup, or even go to trustedprenup.com, shameless plug, and see if we can help you with putting together a prenuptial agreement. And this is a low cost item, okay? Drafting a prenuptial agreement costs a fraction of even what the retainer for a divorce would cost. So that's just the amount of money that we get at the beginning that we usually exceed through the course of a divorce. So a prenup is the best money you could spend. And I have to tell you, if everybody in the world, when they got married, got themselves a prenup, I'd have to get a real job. So trust me, divorce lawyers, we hate prenups generally. And those of us like me who are prenup evangelists, it's not for our self-interest. It really is because we've seen how chaotic things can go if you don't have a prenuptial agreement. Look, Taylor Swift has established herself not only as a singer, songwriter, musician, but as a shrewd business person, an intelligent business person, and a woman who understands how to negotiate, how to leverage her value the proper way. She is smart. And I would 99.9% guarantee there were already prenuptial discussions on the table before the two of them ever posted their engagement photos, because these are two smart people with lots to lose. And again, I don't think you should look at it as this is anything unromantic. If anything, I think there's something really romantic about prenuptial agreements insofar as it shows that you're two people that can have a meaningful discussion about, hey, what if this marriage ends? What if I hurt you or you hurt me and this marriage isn't for the best of us, and that living happily ever means living separately happily together? What do we owe each other? The best time to figure that out is when you're getting along, when you just got engaged and there's an abundance of optimism and care that you have for each other. There's a line from a Prince song off the album Sign of the Times called If I Was Your Girlfriend, and Prince sings to the woman who he's singing to in the song, "Would you run to me if somebody hurt you, even if that somebody was me?" And that's really what a prenuptial agreement's about. It's saying, hey, look, we love each other. We love each other more than the other 8 billion other options in the world. If one of us hurt the other and this marriage had to end in something other than death, what do we owe each other? And how do we make sure that both people feel safe in this marriage? Look, Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift both have enough money to stop working now and live the rest of their lives incredibly comfortably. But I have no doubt these are two people who will continue to be very successful financially. So it makes a lot of sense for the two of them to take the time to put together an intelligent prenuptial agreement that governs their respective rights and obligations. It's a rule set. And if anybody understands a rule set, it's Travis Kelce, who's been playing a game that has complicated rules for a really long time, and Taylor Swift, who's successfully navigated an industry that is filled with sharks and negotiators and lawyers, and she's done it in a way that put her out on top of the music food chain. So this should be a no-brainer for Travis and Taylor.
So have you seen in your experience that prenups, when we're getting into this kind of wealth, you work with high net worth clients, that it seems like the prenup as it stands right now is kind of, they utilize it, the really, really wealthy utilize it, but the average person, it hasn't really gotten to them yet. Would you say that's your experience?
What I'll tell you is I've been doing this 25 years, and in the last 10 years, and in the last 5 years in particular, I have seen a dramatic rise in the number of people that have prenuptial agreements. And part of that, I think, is that this generation that's now in their 20s and 30s getting married, that peak wedding age that people tend to get married, that they're a more pragmatic bunch. They're a more realistic bunch. Many of them, they're the children of divorce themselves. They saw what happened with their parents, and they saw the effect it had. When I was growing up as a kid in Catholic school, there was like one kid who we were like, his parents are divorced. Everybody else, parents were married, miserably married, a ton of them, but many of them remained married. And so generationally, this generation that's getting engaged now, they are much quicker to have intelligent conversations, pragmatic conversations about divorce. And the best time to get a prenuptial agreement actually is when you're on the come up. Because the truth is, the best thing you could have when you're doing a prenuptial agreement is a crystal ball that's going to tell you what your future is. Because the person who seems up right now could be down in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. And a prenuptial agreement is binding throughout the duration of your marriage. But a major thing that people forget and don't realize is that you can modify your prenuptial agreement by mutual agreement as time passes. So just like you do your will, and then maybe 5 years later, you redo your will because you're not talking to the person who you'd left, certain things to anymore. And now you want to give money to this charity instead of that charity. Same thing can be done with a prenup where, okay, now we bought a vacation home. Let's amend our prenup to include something different. And you can do that when two people jointly agree, hey, it's time to make modifications of our prenups. If somebody said to me, I'm thinking about getting married, when should I have a prenup? I'd say early and often. There's no reason not to amend your prenuptial agreement because, again, it's a contract between two people that in good faith are having a discussion about what their respective asset profiles are during the marriage and potentially after the marriage if it ends in divorce or separation.
When it comes to the normalization of prenups, you had a very famous clip where you talked about how you would have a client comes in, you negotiate their prenup, but the next day they're on Bravo talking about how, we don't have a prenup. Yeah. Do you think that that's a negative towards the normalization? Is that something you wish would end?
Yeah, I do. It's happened to me, I think 4 times now at last count, where I had a client, high net worth client, usually a public figure, once I read in a magazine an interview with them where they were explicitly asked, did you guys have a prenup? And they said, no, we didn't feel we needed a prenup. And I knew they were lying because the prenup was in my safe. Like I was there when they executed it. They executed it at my conference room table. But, sometimes people, particularly people, it's the same. Look, there are people that use performance enhancing drugs and it's patently obvious that they use steroids. Like there's no way that grilled chicken breasts and doing lots of resistance workouts made them look that big. It doesn't work that way. You don't put on 30 pounds of muscle in 4 months without performance enhancing drugs. They are eating trembolone sandwiches all day long. So, again, why do those people not tell the truth about these things? I guess there's still some shame attached to it, or there's a feeling that, people in the public media, particularly celebrities, people are already kind of cheering for their downfall a little bit. I'm not sure why we do that. We like to see heroes rise and then we like to see them fall. But I do see a lot of celebrities. I've had it happen, like I said, in 4 instances where I've had a person in the press say they don't have a prenuptial agreement. And I know for a fact that's not true because I've seen the executed prenuptial agreement. Prenups don't get filed with a court. They're not public record. The only time you're going to find out, maybe going to find out if someone has a prenup is when they file for divorce. If the divorce filing isn't sealed, you're going to find out when someone leaks it to the press or if it's an unsealed divorce filing. But in most of the 50 states, matrimonial files are sealed. The only people that can see them are the 2 litigants and their 2 attorneys of record. So even other attorneys can't see who represents somebody or who the litigants are. So most celebrity clients, you can't look up on the court system online their name to see if their action is pending because they do it under what's called an anonymous caption, which is the party's initials. So this would be if they ever got divorced, TS versus TK. And you would never know that it stood for Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift because it's an anonymized caption. By the way, Many celebrity divorces are not even done through the public court system. They're done through private arbitration with a paid private arbitrator, usually a retired judge with a lot of experience. Most of my very high net worth or celebrity clients with a high profile, they don't even trust that the people working inside the court system aren't going to leak information to the press. And they're right to have that concern, because the unified court system has more leaks in it than a dinghy on the harbor. Like, it's got tons of people working within the system, many of whom are making close to minimum wage and can sell to a publication stories. And don't kid yourself, I've had a lot of clients who've sold stories. They sell their information anonymously. They sell screenshots and text messages. There is a huge market for that. I've joked in the past that I could retire if I sold all the secrets that I have for my clients. I'd also be disbarred and subject to a lawsuit, which is why I don't talk about what celebrity clients I've represented. The only celebrity clients I'll ever talk about are ones who A, have given me permission, or B, I've been quoted in the press as their attorney, even though I generally don't speak to the press. Sometimes people will identify me as their lawyer, but you don't know who's represented by who, because in matrimonial proceedings, those are sealed filings. Prenuptial agreements, they're not filed anywhere unless it's filed with a divorce proceeding, and then it's a sealed file. Otherwise, it's kept in the office of the two attorneys who negotiated it and oversaw its execution, and each party maintains a copy of it. Other than that, you don't have to publish it anywhere. Nobody has to know you had a prenup. So again, if the thing holding you back from having a prenuptial agreement is that you don't want people to know you had a prenuptial agreement, again, are you holding back the normalization of prenups? Sure. But is it your right to not tell people? You have every right in the world not to tell people. I'd love to see a world where, in the Instagram pre-wedding world, where it's like, we pick the cake, we pick the dress, look, here's the venue. We also could say, here's a sign in the prenup. I'd love that. But the truth is, people aren't necessarily going to do that, and that's okay. Just like the decision to tell people you're in therapy or not tell people you're in therapy, it's a private issue and you don't have to share it with people. But I certainly agree that if people don't share that they have prenups, people aren't going to recognize that high net worth people and celebrities have prenups. But trust me, high net worth people and celebrities have prenuptial agreements. They didn't get where they are by being idiots. Most of them have a high net worth and they want to keep their high net worth, but they want to keep their financial affairs private.
So people would love to know, let's say Travis Kelce comes in to the law offices of James J. Sexton. You get contracted. You're going to be negotiating his prenup. What's that looking like? What's your strategy?
I'm disappointed because I would have liked to have had Taylor. Like, I always like the slightly higher net worth individual as my client. Plus, I would be able to like hum some of her songs while she was in there. I would actually work some references in. I'd be like, I don't know, all the opposing counsel is mean. I would do like a little greatest hits while I was there. But look, he comes in. What's that conversation look like? I would have the same conversation I have with him that I have with every single client. I tell you, doing what I do for a living, I'm utterly unimpressed by what anybody who comes into my office does for a living. I have the same conversation with you, whether you're a police officer, a firefighter, a linebacker, or somebody who I just saw in concert at the Barclays Center. Like, I have the same conversation. First conversation is, I discuss with you your rights and obligations in the absence of a prenuptial agreement. Because before you sign a contract changing your rights and obligations, it's really important that you understand your rights and obligations in the absence of that contract, right? And most contracts, that's pretty easy to understand. Like, if you're leasing a car, you've signed a contract, a car lease. How's that work? Pretty easy to understand. I'm going to give you money. You're going to let me drive the car, right? If I don't give you the money, you won't let me drive the car. If you don't let me drive the car, I'm not giving you the money. Pretty easy. But when people get married, most people have no idea what they just did legally. Most people have no idea. You buy a house, you get a HUD-1 that explains the mortgage, you get a lead paint disclosure, you get all kinds of disclosures that explain your rights and obligations. You get married, you didn't get a fucking pamphlet. You get nothing. You just did the most legally significant thing you're going to do in your whole life other than die. And you don't even get a piece of paper that tells you that you just opted out of the title system, completely changed your inheritance rights, and a myriad of other things, all of which, by the way, can still be changed by the state legislature without your permission or knowledge. And once they're changed, you can't opt out of the contract. So think about that. If you leased a Honda Civic and they said to you halfway through the lease, we've decided we're going to actually give you a RAV4 and it's got 500,000 miles on it. You would say, well, then I'm not paying the lease payment. Well, that's not how it works when it comes to a marriage contract. Once you sign up and you get married, you sign your marriage license. If you don't have a prenuptial agreement, if the state legislature decides to change the law that governs your marriage, you can't say, well, then I quit the marriage and I don't want those rules to apply to me. They already apply to you. You're stuck. You're in that contract. There are no other contracts in the United States that are like that other than the marriage contract. So that's another reason why prenuptial agreements make absolute sense. So the first conversation I would have with Travis or Taylor is, look, here's what your rights are in the absence of a prenuptial agreement. If you get married, here's what your rights and obligations would be, and here's what changes just happened on the day you got married. Then I talk to them about all the kinds of things you can change in a prenuptial agreement. I take the time to find out what their asset profile is in general, assets, liabilities, how those things are held, what title they're in, what their future income is anticipated to be. And then I talk to them about their soon-to-be spouse. What's their assets, liabilities, future financial prospects? What plans do they have to adopt or have children? You know, what do they envision their future as being? And then I talk to them about the whole menu of possibilities. Because here's the thing. The limits of a prenuptial agreement are generally the limits of your imagination. You can put any kinds of provision in that makes sense to you. And I've seen people put in some crazy things, but they're enforceable. That's what you have to remember is these are enforceable agreements. As long as you're not putting in something that is patently contrary to law. Like, if you cheat on me, I can kill your brother. Okay, that would not be permissible. You're allowed to put in provisions that say all kinds of crazy things. The craziest example I often quote is I had a client who had a prenuptial agreement with his spouse that said for every 10 pounds she gained during the marriage, she lost $10,000 a month in alimony. It was enforceable and it was upheld by a court at the time they divorced. The judge who reviewed it said, this is a boorish prenuptial agreement. I don't know why you married this guy, but it's a contract and the two of you agreed to it, so we're going to enforce it.
This is a great question. You know, some of your most viral clips are, like you said, the weight loss, the weight gain prenup.
People love crazy prenups.
So we'd love to ask about some of your craziest prenups, memorable prenups. What would you say some of them are?
I mean, the weight one was a big one. I've had a lot of people that have very extensive provisions regarding pets. There's a lot of pet stuff. Pets is a big, big thing. It's actually why, another shameless plug, we've started trustedpetnup.com, which is actually where we will draft pet agreements for people that are in a romantic relationship, cohabitating or getting married, and they want to have provisions that protect their companion animals, dogs, cats, birds, chickens, whatever you want, lizards. People have all kinds of pets, and we're happy to help people with that. By the way, trustedpetnup.com, we don't charge for any of those. If you adopt or rescue a pet, we will do it for free. And if you already adopted a pet or you purchased a pet from a breeder, we will do it on a pay-as-you-wish basis. And we donate 1/2 of the proceeds to local 501c3 animal rescues, and the other half we use to keep the platform alive. So Petnups is something everybody should have if they have a companion animal, but those are some of the provisions that are often very, very detailed and wacky because people are wacky about their pets. Some of the things people put into prenups have to do with how crazy people are when it comes to finances in the relationship. I mean, I've had people put in prenuptial agreements that they get a push present for every child that they have, that they are taken on a baby moon with a certain frequency, that they are given a jewelry allowance or what was one called a self-care allowance. I had a guy who was marrying a model and she said she wanted what was called a self-care allowance. It was $30,000 a month and it was intended to cover hair extensions, Botox, fillers, any of those other kinds of self-care items. Guy signed off on it. Guy was worth a lot of money, so I feel like he felt it was an okay investment. But it basically said that even if we divorce, you have to continue to pay these things. I've had cases where a person said, if we divorce, you have to pay for me to have cosmetic surgery up to a certain amount of money. I've had people who put in advance that if we marry, that you have to pay for me to have, veneers and a boob job and a whole bunch of other things. I've had people protect specific assets that are bizarre assets. Like, it's understandable when someone says, hey, my car collection is mine, or my watch collection is mine, or my Birkin bag collection is mine. But I've had people who put in provisions about like very specific assets that I want to say to them, like, Why is that in there? That's like a $45 item. Why is that so important to you? But, to some people, it's really important. Like Travis Kelce, for example, if he wanted to put in provisions that say, hey, look, any of my football memorabilia is going to remain mine under all circumstances. Even if I gave you one of my Super Bowl rings as a gift, you have to give it back to me in the event that we divorce. People can put in whatever provisions they want to, again, so long as it's a bargain for consideration between the two parties. So I think simple is clean, and simple and clean is easiest, and it's easiest for people to navigate, but people have the right to conduct their marriages however they want, and prenups are just a contract that governs your marriage.
So in your experience, have you ever managed to get a prenup thrown out under any kind of circumstances?
I am proud to say that I have never had any of my prenups set aside by a court in 25 years of practice. I've never had a prenup that I've drafted set aside. So I'm very proud of that. Is that a guarantee that my prenups are ironclad? It's not. No lawyer can make that guarantee. Anyone who does is lying. But I'm very proud of that. That's not just because I'm a good drafts person. It's because there is a presumption legally that a prenup is a binding contract if it contains the basic things that a prenup needs to contain in order to be legally binding, which most lawyers are aware of.
Have you gotten other people's prenups thrown out? So the other
I've had 2 prenups set aside. I've been successful in setting aside 2 prenups. And usually it's because they were drafted poorly. It was usually somebody went online and downloaded, something off the internet, or it wasn't, AI, because it was before ChatGPT or any of those other types of AI technologies. But very often, even if someone's worth millions of dollars, they don't feel like spending a few $1,000s on a prenuptial agreement. And they'll go out penny wise, pound foolish, and they'll say, okay, I downloaded this and we customized it, but we didn't sign it in the presence of a notary public. It didn't contain financial disclosure. The person that I'm marrying isn't fluent in English, and it's in English, and it doesn't contain any provisions that talk about the fact that this person had the option to have it translated by a certified translator into their native language. All kinds of blind spots that a non-lawyer would see, but a person who's 6 minutes out of law school would absolutely tell a person are really, really important. So, and an experienced matrimonial attorney would never let happen. So yeah, I've had 2 that I was able to set aside. Here's a story just to show you how binding prenups can be of a case I lost. Okay. So when a lawyer's talking about a case they lost, perk your ears up because we don't like talking about our losses. But here's one that I lost. I was hired by a woman to set aside a prenup. I did not draft that prenup because it was drafted 28 years ago. Okay, 28 years ago. I wasn't a lawyer back then. So I was hired by this woman to try to set aside a prenup. This prenup was, in its performance, going to be incredibly unfair to this woman. Under this prenup, she was going to walk out with about $1 million. Without the prenup, she would have walked out with about $50 million, okay? So there's a lot on the line here. This prenuptial agreement, she did not have an attorney representing her at the time that she signed off on it. And where did she sign off on it? In the vestibule of the church when she was getting married, where there were 120 people waiting in the church for the wedding ceremony, and she was 3 months pregnant. So I've got a 3-month pregnant woman with 120 people in the audience at the church without an attorney who gets handed a prenuptial agreement by this guy. And he says, oh, you have to sign this or we're not getting married. And she just signed it and walked on down the aisle. And 28 years and 3 children later, we went in to try to set aside that prenup. And after a very hotly contested trial, at the conclusion, the court said, so sad, too bad, this was a binding contract and you have no right to set it aside. And you're getting your $1 million and the $49 million additional dollars that you were entitled to. Sorry, you're not getting it. So that's how binding and serious prenuptial agreements are. You do not want to sign a prenuptial agreement thinking, oh yeah, that'll be easy to get set aside. People have this delusional belief that a properly drafted, properly executed prenuptial agreement isn't worth the paper it's printed on. Those things aren't enforceable. And I think it's a thing that people say when they don't want to have the difficult conversation. I hear it from men a lot. Men are like, oh, I'm not getting a prenup. Those things don't stand up in court anyway. It's a false sense of security. Bull fucking shit. That is simply not true. Prenuptial agreements, if properly drafted and properly executed, are binding. They're scary how binding they are. So that is not a valid excuse to not get a prenuptial agreement.
So now we're going to take a look at a viewer submission
Oh boy.
in this special prenup episode.
Grant went to sextonshow.com and sent us his submission. All of you should send us submissions at sextonshow.com. Story ideas, show ideas, questions, comments, hate mail, love mail, whatever it is. Okay. Here's what Grant had to say. I'm about to propose. Congratulations. And I want to have a prenup. Good for you. Do I bring it up before or after popping the question? Do we have to map out any assets and responsibilities? If our financial situation changes, does the same prenup apply, or do we need to amend an existing agreement? And how do I go about navigating the awkwardness? She and her family think it's rude. How do I pose this in a more polite way? Grant, that's like 7 questions. We got to break these down one at a time, big man. All right. I'm about to propose. I want to have a prenup. Congratulations, and you're smart. Do I bring it up before or after popping the question? Buddy, that is entirely up to you. That has to do with the dynamics in your relationship. I'd like to think that before someone is about to ask the serious question of, will you marry me? They probably had some conversations with this person about what they envision as their future to be, right? They talk about, hey, do you want kids? Do you not want kids? Do you go to church? Do you not go to church? Do you have a relationship with your family? Do you not? Where would you want to spend Thanksgiving? Any of those kinds of questions might be an intelligent one to have before you pop the question. But if you have never broached the subject of a prenuptial agreement, it might be smart to do it in advance. If nothing else, just to sort of see how this person would respond. Because if you think a prenuptial agreement makes sense and their response is hell to the no, you might want to know that before you pop the question. So a safe way to do it, thank you, Taylor, once again, might be to say, hey, did you hear about the exciting, come on, this is like Pearl Harbor for 20 and 30 something year old dudes out there. Like everyone now is going to be like, look, they got engaged. We should get engaged. Look how romantic it was. So this is an opportunity for you to say, hey, did you hear about, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce? Boy, I bet they're going to have a hell of a prenuptial agreement. I saw that dashingly handsome tattooed lawyer in the viral TikTok talking all about it. How do you feel about prenups? Something like that. You don't have to talk about me being handsome, but it's nice if you do. So what you do is you're going to bring it up somehow in an innocent way, talk about it in the context of other people, and then see how that person responds. And if they go, well, I would never get a prenup, well, now you know you're in for a more difficult conversation. I don't know that I'd give up on it if it's something you feel strongly about, but at least you know you're going into hostile terrain at that point. But maybe they say, oh yeah, that makes sense. And they're of the normalized prenup bunch. So I think I would propose, see what I did there? That you should, in advance of the actual proposal, have the conversation. But if you haven't, it's really never too late to have that conversation. I wouldn't suggest doing it in the vestibule of the church, but I think you should definitely have that conversation as far in advance as possible. Do we have to map out any and all assets and responsibilities? Okay, those are 2 different things. If you mean assets and liabilities, that's different. Assets and liabilities, you're going to have to attach a schedule to your prenuptial agreement that lists in general your assets and your liabilities at the time of marriage. Why? Because otherwise, a person doesn't know if this contract is what we call in the law unconscionable. Unconscionable is a contract that is so patently unfair that no reasonable person would accept it and no fair dealing person would offer it. And it's at the time of execution, not at the time of enforcement. So it's not what did it ultimately end up being fair or unfair, because no one could see the future. It's at the time you signed it, was this an unfair contract? And one of the metrics for that is, if this person who you're signing a prenup with, if they think you have $100,000 in the bank and they have $50,000 in the bank, and they're willing to do a prenup under those circumstances where they waive alimony or they waive division of assets, and it turns out you have $100 million in the bank, that's fraud. That's unconscionable. Okay. You made a material misrepresentation of fact about what your assets and liabilities were, and they relied on that when making their decision about the prenuptial agreement. So you have to have general financial disclosure at the time of a prenuptial agreement. So you do have to disclose your assets and liabilities. In terms of if you mean responsibilities, like you said, you do not have to map out like who's going to do the dishes, who's going to take out the trash in the marriage, who's going to be responsible for taking care of the kids, who's going to be the breadwinner. Those things are allowed to change and fluctuate throughout the marriage, and you don't have to lay that out. Some people like to put in the prenuptial agreement that one person is going to be primarily responsible for paying the mortgage on the house or primarily responsible for paying the day-to-day expenses of the couple. You can put those kinds of things in a prenuptial agreement, but it's not something that is commonly put in prenuptial agreements. If our financial situation changes, does the same prenup apply or do we need to amend an existing agreement? Well, if your financial situation changes, and it will, everyone's financial situation changes on a daily basis to some degree. You spend money, you make money, the stock market goes up and down, your retirement account goes up and down, you lose your job, you get a new job, it happens all the time. And you're signing a contract that has to do with your future financial circumstances. So it's anticipated that your financial circumstances are going to change. And the purpose of a prenup is to bind your respective rights and obligations in a way that changes, meaning it foresees that there are going to be changes, but it creates categories of assets that as your asset profile changes, you can make sure you're keeping control over what's yours, what's mine, and what's ours. So you anticipate that. Can you amend the agreement? As I said earlier, it's smart to amend an agreement as situations change. If one of you hits the lottery, if one of you has a misfortune financially, if one of your earning capacity changes dramatically, of course, you can change your prenup. I encourage people to do so, but you don't have to. And how do I go about navigating the awkwardness? She and her family think it's rude. How do I pose it in a more polite way? That's really the big question, Grant. And it's the big question that most people have, including probably Taylor and Travis, if they're in that situation where they haven't had to talk about the prenup yet. It's a very, very difficult conversation for some people to know how to start because it feels like you're talking at the beginning of something about it failing. But you have to frame it differently. One, talk about the fact that every marriage has a prenup, either one written by the government, who none of us trust that much that we're going to let it govern our relationship, or one that's drafted by the two people involved. I think the best way to talk about prenuptial agreements is to talk about the fact that it's hard to feel loved if you don't feel safe. And both people in a relationship should feel safe. They should feel safe from violence. They should feel safe from threats, financial threats, or anything else. Someone being able to say, if you leave me, you'll be broke and penniless. By the way, even if you're the person with money, being in a relationship where you know that this person would be broke and penniless if they broke up with you, you don't want to be in that position because you're going to be thinking for the rest of your life, is this person with me because they love me and they want to be with me, or are they with me because they're afraid they're going to be penniless without me? So for both of you, we should have that safety and that security. And for the person who has less assets, to know that you're not going to try to leverage against them things in the marriage in exchange for the financial benefit that you have over them. It's really, really important to frame it in the conversation of both of us should feel safe and secure in this relationship and not feel like we can't leave the relationship without destroying our own lives and not having the basic things that we need. Hey gang, that's it for our Taylor and Travis Prenup Spectacular. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Better Call Sexton. Hey, before I forget to say it, if I didn't say it before, congratulations, Taylor, and to Travis. I wish you a lifetime of love and happiness. You both deserve it. You're two really wonderful people who've added a lot of value to a lot of people's lives, and you deserve lots and lots of happiness. I hope neither of you ever ends up in my office, unless it's for a prenup, in which case, Taylor, call me. I'll do it for free. I love you. I'm a fan. Okay? Thanks. See you soon. Join us at sextonshow.com.